Hello, America. This is where we'll locate today's episode, in your mighty northeastern reaches, and I promise I will judiciously ration any overuse of scenic, panning drone clips. I flew over to the East Coast in early-ish winter and landed in Boston at some obscene time for my body clock. 48 hours a week. The temperature even by the ocean was below zero, so that was good for me, as I was there for what you'd expect me to be searching for. Then this, a 10-degree increase in temperature, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and practically all of the snow in the state was melted and gone. It was replaced with the sheer joy that you know us Brits enjoy quite enough of back on our side of the Atlantic. Still, Boston has charm even in the winter rain, and I passed a couple of wet days ingratiating myself with locals. That was over soon enough, but I wasn't headed out of town until the following day, and blue skies don't bring back winter conditions with any meaningfulness. We needed a good dump of snow. So why not a little tourism after a couple of work meetings at one of the many, many universities? Newer buildings, older buildings, Boston does a pretty passable job of having the two sit alongside each other, and is lucky to have not needed to have the rushed, architecturally questionable rebuild necessary across post-war Europe. Some of the historic quarter has become a little twee and pseudo in the interest of leveraging cash from those seeking the heritage feel, but the waterfront is rather more familiar since I've frequented more marinas over the last couple of years than in my previous 30. A little more slightly forced tourist stuff, and Googling to find out why the vapour escaping through pavement vents is a real thing and not just in the movies. Anyway, enough of the urban travel vlog. Snow returned and had been doing so inland and further north. It wasn't feet and feet, but better than nothing, and I hoped that things would improve after a road trip. I was upgraded by the rental company into a medium-sized tank, about 40 foot long, with comparable fuel economy, and set off. If I was to get any winter training or testing, we'd need some elevation, so the White Mountains were the obvious target. 5 or 10 degrees colder might make the difference. Drone laws in the US are pretty complicated, given that you have the multi-layering of jurisdictions. Local, park, agency, state, federal. But with drone registration and finding an up-to-date map, I was fairly sure my sneaky peek of the conditions from above wouldn't send my humble trip down a path towards chaos and lifelong incarceration. It was a fair way to drive, so I used an app where you can camp legally on private rural land for a small fee, useful when not in true wilderness areas. They even had a fire pit, and channel regulars will recognise this as where I filmed one of the Expedition Meal mini-series episodes. Now, you'll notice the lack of snow once again. The intention was not to make a film similar to the rather successful Yukon one I did, which covered the oft-ignored weeks that bridged the last of summer with the cold months. I did aim instead to share a proper snowy winter test session on location, but here the snow was still showing up as mere remnants of the rather good pack that had consolidated through November and much of December. So I passed the time train spotting, which if authentic and not carefully positioned to wow the trickle of tourists passing through, was an undeniably aesthetic vision of historic New England. Here, if I recall, not far from the Vermont-New Hampshire state line. The small towns were also as I expected to find in these semi-rural parts of the country. Snow was forecast, in some regions at least, so I committed myself to day hikes. My camping gear needed snow in order to pitch, and besides I had my tank as a base. The small streams and forested trails were picturesque of course, but more like what you'd expect as spring makes its inevitable concession to summer each year. Ice and snow hanging on only in the shade. In other areas not even that, but the clouds were at least encouraging, perhaps to signal some low pressure inbound. But no, they cleared once more, and I amused myself at noticing how when you cross the Vermont to New Hampshire border, the political culture seems to swing markedly from blue to red. I found another overnight spot complete with pond, trees, and a good view to spend the night, and resigned myself to the fact that I need to head much further up into the peaks to get any snow time. This was the evening that we'd been forecast 5 inches of snow. I suppose it makes fire prep and lighting easier though. There were some offcuts from someone making local cabin carpentry upgrades, so with dry knife shavings, a little dry moss and a flint and steel, man discovered fire. There are apparently lots of tree pest infections around these parts, so kiln-dried firewood can't be moved around from region to region. It meant I was always a little short or scavenging around, but I always found enough to burn in order to cook. It's, for me, a strange middle way, this style of semi-camping, semi-road trip. I'm so used to minimalist equipment, every ounce measured and justified. Despite there being no need here, I did still want to do things in a basic manner and only flew over with one large bag of things. So, one metal tray from Walmart and a multi-purpose utensil, and local beef. You can't eat lumps, chunks or patties of meat on Spartan expeditions, since it must all be rehydrated in boiling water, let alone make an actual burger, so this is a true extravagance. Someone mentioned utensil safety with non-stick coatings in a recent video, so you'll be happier that I have a wooden one here. So I'll be able to cook and serve my burger in a fashionable brioche bun with relish and greens without guaranteeing my swift and certain demise. It'll just be from the particulates from the wood fire, I suppose. I hear that gratings or other methods of keeping the pan stable over the fire are overrated. Nonetheless, a fine meal results with some crunchy green rabbit food in there to delude me of the health benefits of the dinner I had chosen. The next day we headed up, found snow, but sadly not the cold. Still not quite cold enough for a warm hat, but it's getting more and more wintry. I planned a route up and through the forest, hopefully offering better conditions, and with a purpose. I'll have to apologise for the noise of the river, which is just behind you, but anyway, the good news is we've managed to actually find some snow, which I know sounds kind of strange in the winter in New Hampshire, but anyway, the snow line is reasonably high up because there's been a warm front that came through a few days ago, which got rid of some really good snow dumps from the last couple of weeks. Anyway, we managed to find some. We're higher up, we're in the White Mountains, and we're actually going to go somewhere now. And I promise this is not a betrayal of those prototype snowshoes that I was working on in Canada last year, but they're specifically for very cold, hard-packed snow on things like frozen lakes. This is rather different, and I was intrigued about the idea of using extremely high-density foam, and luckily I didn't have to make any myself because I have a pair here of relatively low cost. Yeah, high-density foam base, very, very straightforward, spikes in the bottom for icy areas, but I'm always a big fan of super, super simple, and I've found complicated snowshoes in the past have either broken or just been a pain or been a bit too heavy. So anyway, we'll see how these ones go, and I'll report back. The inbuilt nylon straps are designed to fit medium to large hiking boots, and so you need to do a major modification if you wanted to use proper polar or snow boots in them. But we will not hold that against them. It's hard being all snowshoes to all men. A secure fit, and the Velcro means that you may not have the same adjustability as buckles or clips, but it's simple, easy to replace, and doesn't slip in use. Now, people of the channel, enjoy all of these not at all contrived sets of footage of me in action on the desperately thin snowpack surviving still on the damp ground. Set camera up, pretend to walk the section for the first time, collect camera, rinse and repeat. The shoes work well. They allow a natural gait, make little impact on the admittedly far, far from powdery snow, and still grip nicely on the icier parts. I wonder how the foam structure will endure after some real miles. Oh, and people have asked about the jacket. For any of you wondering what I'm wearing today, I'm afraid this is a one of one. It was designed when I was working with my Dark Ice project team with Adidas, Gore-Tex and Walmart. And it's basically a wind weave outer with a woolen liner. And yes, it was a prototype and you cannot buy one of those. Very, very sorry. But you can buy, this is actually a bit of a cool trick. This is a Helly Hansen. Underneath here it's a mixture of merino wool and leafer, anyway, polypropylene, and this isn't actually from their sort of expensive outdoor adventurer range. This is actually from their workwear range, and you can get really, really well cut, well designed, well made garments for actually quite a lot less money because they're marketing it to different people. Same sort of workmanship, same quality materials, so that's a little bit of a trick. Go for Helly Hansen workwear because their stuff is good. I like their hats as well. Anyway, focus on the wonderful winter forest, all to myself. Day hikers or other wintry outdoorsy people were well and truly put off heading out, it seems. I don't really blame them as the melting and the water flow continued unabated, but I continued my trail test of these sub-$100 contraptions. I hate it when snowshoes clash with each other on their inner edges, unless you walk with the sort of unnatural gait you'd have after accidentally sitting on the business end of a ski pole. No problem here, and I could even run easily in them, testament to their lightweight and well-designed shape. My target for the day was a set of rapids on the main river flowing down from the highest ground. We got there in good time, which of course meant time to deploy the loud, buzzy flying thing. There we go, a rather spectacular cascade. Enjoyed that. Thank you, America. It was also a reminder of the danger of ice when conditions can't decide whether they are freezing or thawing. Always test for underflow before you step, even if the area you're on right now seems robust. Public safety announcement over, I hiked the rest of the loop back downhill to the scorching heat of the mountain valley. This literally could have been taken during summer if you didn't know that there was snow behind me. Oh, America. And I found where I left the tank. Well, I think the only thing to be particularly cheery about today is my homage to the great Alan with my bright orange t-shirt. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of sleeting, raining, the temperature's been dodging up and down around freezing for the last day or so. It should get colder in the next day, but it's just kind of eating through my time, which is a bit frustrating, but we'll make the best of it. I'm afraid all the firewood is very wet, so that ain't happening, but we'll go down to the river, see what's what. I'm not suggesting that walking down to the river, another river by the way, not the one from the hike, was going to generate an epiphany of new ideas, but I'm certain no one ever regrets spending time next to a pristine mountain river. Turns out though, I did have an idea. Settle in, folks. Because it's a warm, wet day, I thought I'd have a bit of a play. And it turns out this is what I managed so far with wet bark. A few small bits of wood which I could find, and then a couple of logs which I'm trying to dry out on top of the burning bark. But my expectation is that this is somewhat optimistic. Once that bark's gone, I doubt it would have dried out the logs well enough to burn them, but we might as well give it a go. The bark, as expected, did not last long, and we had nowhere near enough dry wood or heat to get over that hump, but I tried again and foraged again. Good news, I managed to get some of the dampish wood dry, and it means that we're cooking some bread. This is the first time that I've tried this. It's probably not going to be great, and I've also got some honey butter. If anyone knows the reference to honey butter, then you've been subscribing to the correct YouTube channels.
Is there anything better than warm fresh bread? Yes, warm fresh bread with honey butter.
Yes. It's Luke at the Outdoor Boys. Now, he normally brings real honey butter, and I came up with this idea of, can you do freeze-dried honey butter? So I got dried honey powder and dry butter powder. I've kind of rehydrated it, and I'll see how it goes with this bread. Now, this is not going to be as good as his. Goes without saying, really, but it doesn't mean we can't get stuck in and learn. My first attempt with guesstimated ingredient ratios was pretty damn close to the mark, but over-risen, and I forgot the salt. Also, I'm intentionally allowing myself only the one pan for mixing and baking. It's possible I went for a little bit too much baking powder, so it's risen quite a bit, but still steaming. Really good. This is literally the first ever bread I've ever made. And no one was killed. A good first crack, but I was still hungry for more bread and for improvement. I think they call it personal development or wellness or something. Right, now I've devoured the first load, I'm now going to do it even better, and I'm going to be doing it through my incredibly precise management system, which is going to be that much flour. It's going to be exactly the same as last time, this much baking powder. Actually no, maybe a touch less than last time round, because that was quite puffy bread. Okay, yes, in a non-stilted camping scenario, I would of course prepare the portions in their own bags and not keep the original paper packaging. And we have some salt that I got from the Boston Hotel buffet. Apparently salt is good. Right, got that. And now I've got some herbs, which from Trader Joe's. It's actually really nice. Let's do a couple of sprinkles of those. Try not to drop that in the snow. Anyway, now I can give that a quick stir. Then we need water, and I promise this is not ginger beer, it's in an old ginger beer bottle. This is the quantity I'm not really sure about, so I'm just going to stick a load of water in. And mix it all together. This is serious Nigella stuff here. Good, I went a little bit too low on the water. Better than having too much, I suppose. Oh, tiny bit of flour has gone absent without leave. I hear that you should do this with your hands, but if you're on a trip like this, you don't really have a tap to rinse your hands afterwards. So I'm going to try and do it mixing using my camping spoon. That, you know what? I've done it perfectly again. Like, no human has ever made a bread mixture better than that. I don't know quite what to say. I think I might be rather good at this. I've never been one to overrate my abilities. Alright, so spread it all out a bit. I'm not sure that's lickable. I wouldn't recommend that. Right, time to get it on the fire. Alright, stick that on. It went on the fire, and I was so enormously confident after round 1's near perfection, so excited in fact that I forgot to flip it, and so we ended up with a half-burnt, half-bulging mutant monstrosity. Okay, a third time it will be then. I will try and not mess it up this time. I added some more seeds and seasoning into this one, so don't be alarmed at the different appearance. I just wanted some variety. This was probably the least visually appealing of the three, but it smelled sensational, and the squishiness seemed spot on. That's not a half bad fire given the lack of dry firewood. Oh, that looks fantastic. Let's have some of this with some honey butter. Oh, it's still really hot. It's not quite as gooey as honey. It's kind of got the consistency of brandy butter. Yeah, I've not quite got this right, but I'm close. Honestly, probably a little bit less butter and a bit more honey. Got a little bit of washing up to do. I am an outdoor baking titan. A little bit of good news, we've had some snow overnight, although it's still not cold, as you can tell from the fact I'm just wearing one heli and a baseball cap. But I think the cold is coming tonight, and it's just in time for me to head back down to Boston. Anyway, I've got another day or so left, and I'll try and make the best of it. The snowshoes survived just fine after I unburied them, with not a single sign of use from the miles covered, so I think there's something in the idea of a high-quality foam as the unibody of a snowshoe. I'll ponder, and so should you. This was the first time, practically all trip, I'd seen branches and twigs carrying the weight of fresh snow, but that charming image was soon destroyed as a front arrived about an hour later with winds that shook it all off again. Never mind, the snow all ended up on the ground, the temperatures were below freezing and gave the snow half a chance of surviving, and it was time to consider the drive back, via a detour across one corner of the state of Maine. What I've noticed, stopping along the way all over the place, from parks to forestry land and the other 1,000 types of jurisdiction, is that you guys in the land of freedom love your rules, fees, regulations, prohibitions and closures. Anyhow, what a drive, and we did need 4x4 high ratio on the slippery sections early in the morning. I couldn't leave without a little more mavericking, and I really must get some practice in working out the various auto-follow and auto-tracking features, so the droniness can be more dynamic and actually include more of me doing things. It's a stunning part of the country, also snow-dusted trees really are needed for that full effect. I admit to finding barren, treeless, cold regions more appealing, and of course easier to travel long distances over, but still. Oh, and the tank was still going strong, guzzling all the fossil fuel it could lay its wheels on, and we got back to the edges of semi-urban New Hampshire, then Massachusetts. But not before a brief industrial history tour. Before I knew it, Boston, which had wisely swapped out bad weather for more of what we'd expect around Christmas time, and I did the tourist thing for a couple more days, marvelled at how you can charge even more for beer than we do in London, all whilst claiming a pint is less than half a litre. My affection for Boston was restored by a final sunny morning and a snowy walk on the beach. So this is the end of my New England mini-adventure. What have I achieved? Dozens of incremental clothing and equipment tweaks and ideas, my first visit to 3 new US states, and at least some time on snow, which I needed. Rather a long way to come to learn to bake bread. But I enjoyed it. Bye.